Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to survive a drop ride. And if you're like, what's a drop ride? You know what a drop ride is. It's that ride you've been avoiding. No, a drop ride is a group ride where even if you get a flat and mechanical, or if you don't have the fitness to hold the pace, they're not slowing down and waiting for you. Now, there's basically two different types of drop rides. You have drop rides that are paced, and you have drop rides that are not paced. And I'll share the characteristics of both of those. Now, before I even start getting into the content, I got to do a salute to all of my Dutchies, everybody who's been watching and supporting the channel from the Netherlands. Appreciate you guys big time. Now, the ride that I'm going to feature in this video is the Ride 84 group ride that I typically do on Saturday mornings. Now, some of you are going to see people on TT bikes and you're going to be like, hey, that's a big no-no. Listen. During COVID, when a lot of our fast group rides like Alligator, Flyers, Memorial Ride here in South Florida, when those rides kind of dissipated during COVID, Alex's bike shop started this ride with a bunch of TT guys. And then all the fast guys heard that there's a fast ride out of Alex's and they started showing up. It used to be that the TT guys would be in the front, the roadies would be in the back and just get a good workout. And it's been one of those things where it just kind of like becomes like a jumbled thing. So I know people are going to comment about, it being unsafe to do a group ride with TT, but look, this was their ride. We just kind of jumped in. So, all right, I'm excited about this content. Let's get into this. So the ride starts out of Alex's bike shop in Weston, Florida at 7 a.m. sharp. And because of the high heat and humidity, I've got to make sure that I get all the condensation off of my lens so that we have nice, crisp footage.
What's going on, bro? How you doing?
Right out of my ear. Now we're back. No, I'm fine. Oh, Louis, you see the video, right?
I see you. What's up, man?
I always enjoy the opportunity to do a little bit of meet and greet with some of my friends that I don't get to see for the entire week. That's my friend Rich. I actually tell him that he looks right through me on group rides, so he wanted to make sure that we had eye contact. Now, a couple things about these types of rides. You want to make sure that you get some sort of warm up before the ride gets going. You're going to see that we're getting ready to start hitting 2021 in a few minutes. So whether you ride to the ride or get there early and warm up in the parking lot, you want to do something to kind of like get going before you actually get on the ride. The other thing is I'm being very casual today. I'm usually way up front, maybe 6th to 10th wheel back. I'm sitting here way in the back with my friends, just, kind of goofing off and getting a very slow start. You can see way up the road. I'm getting ready to get serious and start moving up a little bit with these guys. Now, as far as drop rides go, this would come under the category of a paced ride, which means that there's somebody or a group of people up front who are going to set a steady, consistent pace. And one of the reasons why I'm okay back here, even though the group is way up, we really can't see them anymore, is that number one, all these guys that are around me are very strong. Even if the guys in the front were to take off and start doing 25 or something like that, we would get back on. And it's not necessarily something that I would recommend, but I'm usually really working my nerves trying to get in the 6th to 10th wheel and, staying on the wheels very early on. And sometimes on these types of rides, you don't need to be that stressed just because there's going to be a steady pace. So I decided today to just take a little bit more of a casual approach to it. And you'll see that as we get past certain parts of the ride, we'll be back on the wheels with absolutely no issues. Okay, so I did mention that there's two types of drop rides. One of them is paced and the other one is unpaced. Characteristics of a drop ride that's paced is that, number one, the pace is going to be high once you get past the initial warm-up. There's usually a small group of people who do the rotation, or if it's a very small group, it may just be one or two people who are in charge of doing the rotation. But the idea is that they're responsible for maintaining a very steady pace, and that pace could be like, let's say, between 25 and 27 miles an hour. That's all you're going to get. Of course, you might occasionally get speed creep from time to time. That's just a natural process of any group ride, pace or on pace. Now, in these types of rides, there's no surges from the guys up front, but obviously gaps can occur or form at lights, turns, hills, things like that, where people may have a different level of power or definitely a different skill level in terms of going around corners, and certainly in terms of their ability to clip in real fast. And I know we, even us very experienced guys, we occasionally have issues clipping in, but just understand that you could have surges, but the intent of the group is to not have a whole bunch of surges. Oftentimes these rides, they may start out as a double pace line, but eventually what starts to happen as the ride goes on, people start getting fatigued. You can see that the ride gets a little bit strung out. And when that happens, it is time to move up. So there's just a lot of bodies between me and the front. Somebody, slow down a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take this as an opportunity to scoot my way up a little bit so that I don't have to worry about trying to do this a little bit later on. Now for today's ride, I'm on my Colnago V3 RS. This bike, I've featured it on the channel before, is equipped with Campagnolo Super Record 11 EPS. My front chainring is a 5339 and I'm running an 1123 cassette in the back. Obviously, that's the type of gear ratio that's appropriate for down here on the flat roads. Wheel set is a Campagnolo Bora Ultra wrapped in Vittoria Corsa Control. I'm running 28mm tires, both front and rear, and I believe I have those pumped up right around 80 PSI. So as I mentioned, today's ride is definitely paced. We have maybe 2 to 4 guys who are going to be up front the whole time. They're on TT bikes, so they can definitely, well, first of all, they're very strong, but they can certainly hold this pace that you'll see us when we begin to roll it like around 25. They don't have an issue with it. And what usually happens with this ride is that it's supposed to be a double pace line. At least maybe I'll say the first 6 to 10 rows are definitely a double pace line. They're not particularly close, as I mentioned. They're a little bit spread apart. That's just the way how they ride. But what ends up happening is you fall back into the peloton or into the group. There's got to be 60, 70 different cyclists on this ride. You'll start to see just what we have happening here is people kind of like fill up the gaps. Sometimes people come alongside you, and it ends up looking more like a pack than anything else. It's like, let's call it a mullet ride where it's all business up front, party in the back. And I'm okay with that, and most of the riders have gotten used to that type of format from this ride, and they're okay with it. So it's just something I think that if you have an expectation of what the structure of the ride is going to be, whether it's loose or it's formal or whatever, I think for the most part you'll be okay. This isn't really a peloton, it's like a loose pack, but like I said, I'm okay riding in this type of formation. Now we're about to enter the part of the ride that things are going to get a little bit serious, in that the pace is going to ramp up and stay high for maybe about 4 miles, I believe. This is called Flamingo Road. We're heading south. And one of the things that I do is I do a very soft acceleration. I don't stand up and pump it hard or anything like that, because all I'm going to do is elevate my heart rate, start sapping some energy out of my legs. And I'm able to do that because, number one, I'm still kind of like amongst the wheels, and there's also a whole lot of people behind me. So worst case scenario, let's say I was accelerating too slowly and then people started coming around me, then I'd be able to just slowly match my speed to them. Is one of the things that you want to do to conserve energy. And, without me killing myself, I'm already back on the wheels and I was very comfortable for this stretch of road. Now what's getting ready to happen here, I'm tucked into a very good position, paying attention to everything that's going on around me. We're getting ready to make a right-hand turn, and I'm going to prepare myself for that as we get ready to do a loop with a series of turns through Southwest Ranches. And by the way, all the turns that we are going to do are a 90-degree turn, with the exception of one small part, which is kind of like a little bit of a chicane. So one of the things that you definitely want to do is pay attention to what's going on around you. You notice that before we turned, I looked over my left-hand shoulder, because even though I'm on the outside, I don't want to be surprised by somebody coming around my outside shoulder. One thing that you don't want to have happen when you come out of these corners is you don't want to lose positions. Now, again, I'm not going to kill myself on accelerations, but I'm also going to make sure that I carry as much speed as possible throughout the corners, because if I let a big gap go, then I have to accelerate back into it. Again, that's just energy that I'm wasting that I can use later on in the ride. Now, we're getting ready to get some company on this ride. There's a guy coming up on a four-wheeler, I think that's what you call them, and he's gonna be with us for a little while. I never notice these things on the rides. I usually spot them like later on when I'm editing videos and things like that, but kind of cool to have this kind of stuff. It would be neat if this guy had a GoPro and he was catching one of those nice, fresh, like a panoramic shot of the group going by. That's one of the ways that he could make himself useful. All right, so earlier I talked about paced group rides. Now I'm going to talk about unpaced group rides and what those are like. Best way that I can describe an unpaced group ride is think of it as a game of whack-a-mole ride. The pace is going to be dependent on who's up front at what time and how they feel. The pace again is going to be high if it's a drop ride. It's going to be very surgy. There's going to be constant changes in speed and sometimes very drastic changes in speed, where there could be times where you're going down like 17 miles an hour and next thing you know, you're doing 30, 32. That's just the nature of it. It's not a group ride where they're trying to keep everybody together in some sort of formation. It's kind of like a survival of the fittest. Now, it's likely that the structure of these is going to be a single pace line, maybe with a rotation, and then as you drift backwards, depending on how large the group is going to kind of like take that arrowhead shape, and you'll also get the thing where it's stretched out long single pace line, and then if the speed slows down in it bunches up again. And the strategy that you do with those, because it's just a constant change in speed, is if you're not the strongest guy in the world or you're looking to save energy, when the pace picks up, if you're able to not jeopardize somebody else's ride by letting go of a wheel, is slide your body back a little bit, and then as the pace slows down, kind of like take the opportunity to move back. That's how you survive those. When those become a single pace line and they stay as a single pace line with a rotation, those hurt, and you definitely see a lot of people coming off of those. And when I say coming off of those, I mean getting dropped. Now, the rider coming into shot right next to me is my friend Loxley. Loxley Vasil has been riding in South Florida for a long time. I think Lox went all up to like Cat 2 or something like that. I have to ask him, but he's a strong guy, very generous, quick, and always willing to work in a break or with a group or anything like that. And it was Loxley's birthday a couple days before this ride, so he told me that he spent his birthday riding 100 miles solo, just taking his time, going down to Miami and then coming back up to the Fort Lauderdale, Broward area. So we just took an opportunity to have a little bit of a chit chat. That's the little chicane that I mentioned earlier, and it's the only point of the ride where we have something that's not a 90-degree turn. So again, we're just gonna ride, we're gonna chit chat. I like this little stretch of road right here because the pace usually picks up, but it's really, really smooth. Like if you're on a day where you're having really, really good legs, you are loving this stretch of road, you're stuck in, you're comfortable, you're ready to go. But if you're on a day where you're not having good legs, you're not feeling super, you really get found out right here on this stretch of road. I've seen a lot of people just kind of like do the moonwalk. They start going backwards right here. It's happened to me. It's just one of those stretches of roads where you've been at it for a while, holding down a steady tempo, and it starts to take its toll on you. It's just part of the ride. Now here are the last three things that I want to share with you guys. Kind of like think of it as like my parting shot about dropped rides. First of all, and this really isn't part of it, but don't avoid them. Make sure that it's safe, that it's not a hooligan ride, or that you're breaking traffic laws or endangering yourself, or antagonizing motorists. Those kind of rides aren't what I'm talking about. Stay away from those. That's not cycling. That's, like I said, that's hooliganism, okay? Even if a ride is fast, it can still be orderly where you obey traffic laws and have consideration for your fellow cyclists. These types of rides should do two things. One, stop in the event of a crash, and definitely should stop for traffic lights. If you have rides that don't do that, stay away from those. That's a very poor testimony for cyclists. All right, so number one, make sure you know the route, or make sure you know your way home or to wherever the starting point was in the event that you get dropped. Number two, make sure you have a plan for flats and minor mechanicals. Just make sure that even if it's to call your husband, wife, or Uber, that you have some sort of way of dealing with some sort of unforeseen basic cycling emergency. You don't want to be stranded out in the middle of nowhere without some sort of plan. And number three, if you do get dropped, this is a safety thing. Just because a stretch of road was safe for the entire group, that doesn't mean that that same stretch of road is safe for you as a solo cyclist. I have seen cyclists get dropped on rides, and you know, we're taking a lane, and I see a solo cyclist taking a lane. I'm like, bro, pull over into the bike lane or find a path, because what you're doing on this road by yourself is not safe. So use common sense where that's concerned. And the other thing is, if you do get dropped, come back and stick in a little bit longer. That's one of the things that I did early on. Is there's this ride that just used to drop me every week, but every week my focus was to stay in the ride a little bit longer until I was able to complete the entire ride. If that's your thing, if you're not into that, no big deal. You say you want to try it and experience it, and you know, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, that's fine. But if it's one of those things that you want to do, don't be discouraged by getting dropped. Everybody gets dropped. Even regular guys get dropped if they're on a bad day. If you do get dropped, you know, it's not the end of the world. Come back and do it again. And that's it. Those are my tips on how to survive a dropped ride, be it paced or unpaced. I hope that you guys have enjoyed the footage and the information. As always, our aim here at the channel is to inform, instruct, inspire. Be blessed.